Hey everybody, it's Charlie back again with your Idol Search Round 1 critiques. Remember the format? I'm going from what I consider to be the least successful performance to the most successful performance, giving each contestant some notes and assigning a score from 0.0 to 10.0. So 2.2, 8.8, that kind of thing. Alrighty, I'm gonna get us started with OceanMike. You sang "Bless the Broken Road" by Rascal Flatts, and it pains me to say this because you're clearly one of the more dedicated contestants, but not a single note of that song was in tune. So you really need to practice along with the original recording, not just the track, because not only were you never in the key of the backing track, you also shifted keys at random spots, sometimes mid-phrase, and you look like you were not getting ready to perform so much as you were getting ready to go work out. I can't say that there was really much to redeem this, but hopefully you'll take those notes and give us something better for the next round if you move on. So practice with that original vocal, and I'm wishing you the best of luck. Your score is a 0.8. Alright, next up is Shanoa Sings 1. You sang "Glitter in the Air" by Pink. And I see this as a video full of missed opportunities, unfortunately. The black and white photography and the curtains could have really created an atmosphere that would suit the song well, sort of a contemplative and dreamy moment. Unfortunately, what ended up happening was one of the least successful videos of the week. You were completely disengaged to the point where you looked bored and miserable to be there. And if you look miserable to be there, then we're not going to have a good time either. The fact that you actually sing more in tune than many of your competitors becomes irrelevant when all you do is sing the words without trying to bring them across to your listeners. I'd really like to see you do just a song straight to camera, preferably a still camera, and actually attempt to understand the words you're singing. Otherwise, it just isn't going to be successful, and you're going to be more of a cipher than a performer. Your score is a 1.5. Next up is Mtrogerz singing "Amazed" by Lone Star. I can tell that this song was sung in the same room as your previous video, but the angle makes a really big difference. In this vid we can see the unmade bed off to the side, and like I said last time, I'm not the guy who's gonna harp on presentation that much, but I know Cree has a particular distaste for unmade beds in the background, so I'm just gonna call you out on that. But let's talk about the singing, because that's what really matters to me. As noted by several of the commenters, this is extremely low for you. But the good thing is that until the key change, it wasn't a pleasant tone of your voice because it was so low, but it was actually in tune. So that's an improvement. And there wasn't the key jumping that characterized the previous effort of the first audition round. The lowness, though, just destroys the quality of the vocal tone. But that key change, things just got really out of hand there. It was quite a doozy. And anytime you try to color outside the lines of the melody, very bad things started to happen. One last thing, though it's a country song, please don't affect countryness in your accent. I thought I caught you doing that a couple times where you sang it in a country way rather than singing it in your style. And that was just a little bit painful to hear. Your score is a 2.2. Next up is AubrianaKrystine singing "Home Sweet Home" by Carrie Underwood, originally by Motley Crue. The first verse and chorus of this contained some promise, and it was pretty much in tune. And you do have some power to your voice. But unfortunately, from there on out, and especially on the second verse and chorus, you were nearly an entire half step flat for the duration. And this made for a really difficult listening experience. A couple of notes on presentation. The background was fairly plain, but it was pretty good. And one tendency you have when you're not singing is to give us kind of a forced smile. And that is more distracting than anything because it shows that you're not really into the performance. It distracts us from what should be a more emotional performance. Your score is a 2.6. Next up is Cfetterhoff, Miss Gale. You sang We Belong by Pat Benatar. And I'll definitely say this, your video made me smile. If there's a world that doesn't allow interpretive backyard dancing with sheets set to 80s pop hits, I don't want to be a part of that world. And so, in that sense, it was somewhat successful. But unfortunately, I got the sense that you were reading the lyrics from somewhere off screen, which is a big no-no in the competition. But the biggest issue is that your voice is not at all suited to such a powerful song. And I thought this might be because you were out of breath from dancing, but I checked out some of your other videos, and that's really just more of your sound. It's not the power vocalist kind of a voice. And also, many times in this very rhythmic song, you either got ahead of or behind the beat, and that lessens the impact of the vocal that you're bringing to us. Still, unlike several of the competitors, you've got commitment, and you seem to be having fun, so I'm very glad about that. Your score is a 3.0. Next up is Rockin' Ren 88, Miss Karen. You sang Carry On My Wayward Son by Kansas, and it's not that you have a terrible voice, it's that it was completely unsuited to this song. I'm wondering what went into the decision to choose this particular song. Just because you like a song doesn't mean that you're going to sound good singing it. And so there were pitch problems throughout, and the sound itself seemed a bit muffled. The dance moves were a little bit silly, but I always appreciate a little silliness. I'd have loved if you had held on to the guitar from the first video and done a slower kind of singer-songwriter vibe version of the song, because I really think that's where you're the strongest, if I'm being honest, and that would have brought some originality to the mix. As it stands, though, this was below average karaoke, and your score is 3.3. Next up is Shanna Sings 1, singing Somebody to Love by Queen, and you really frustrate me, Shanna, because you can sing, but when you're performing for us, it seems like you'd rather be anywhere but in front of the camera. So just because you're not singing at a given moment doesn't mean we're not watching. And singing with a vocalist in the background whose style you're clearly sort of copying, you're kind of aping their inflections, it doesn't give us any sense of what originality you could have brought to the performance yourself. And in fact, this might sound a little harsh, but based on what I've seen so far, I'm not too sure that there's much originality there. So the task I'm going to give you is to prove me wrong, to interpret something your way, and to prove that you really care about this competition. For right now, your score is a 3.6. Next up is singer HSM 9000, Ivy, singing It's Your Love by Tim McGraw and Faith Hill. And Ivy, I'm sorry to say, but this was a real step back for you. You should only sing a song a cappella if you feel that it will add to your performance. And this was begging for an accompaniment for these reasons. First, having a background helps to keep you in the rhythm of the song. By the end, it felt like you were just singing words off a sheet, not feeling a single one of them, and especially on the It's Your Loves, where there's a pause in between each of those words, you were Russian enough to be living in the Soviet Union. Secondly, having that backing keeps you accountable to the key that you're singing in. Here, you were somewhat in tune, but a lot of notes were flat, and a lot of them sounded sort of the same, whereas in the original there's a very strong, clear melody. I really hope that you made the decision to go a cappella because you genuinely thought that it would add something, and not because you just didn't want or didn't have time to learn the chords. Because this competition takes dedication, and while I think there's enough truly bad performances for you to skate by this round, this is nowhere near a top 10 performance, and maybe not even top 15. I gotta call them like I see them, and your score is a 4.1. Next up is IdolSearchAngela, who did Superstition by Stevie Wonder. And I like that you had fun with this performance. The dancing was somewhat amusing, but otherwise I thought that this was just okay. I feel like you relied a bit on the same vocal patterns throughout the performance, like, superstition ain't the way. Like, you did that on several, that was really terribly sung, but you did that on several of the sequences to the point where it got mechanical. And as you know, having been a judge and commentator for the contest, average here is not good enough. I wish you would have brought something a little more original to the table. And frankly, this song is quite overdone. I think it began here with song choice. It's been done quite a lot in Idol and in karaoke bars across America, and I think it might be time for the song itself to be retired. Not that I'm docking you for that, but I think that if you did choose the song, you should have brought something a little more original to it. And your score is a 4.4. Next up is Karen Pink 510 singing Tainted Love by Soft Cell. And the things that you say at the beginning regarding the scandalous nature of the song could really be more at home in the edit section. So I wish this video had just begun when you started singing. You've really got a lovely tone to your voice. I think you mentioned Rihanna when the song was starting. She, of course, sampled this song for her #1 hit, SOS. And this reminds me a bit of her, actually, your vocal tone. Because you've got a little bit of soul and flavor in your tone. I just said flavor. Yes, I did. Which is lacking in many of your competitors. So the major pitch issues came, though, when you went up on the First I Ran From You section. It went sharp, as you can tell, because when you went back down for Tainted Love, it was in an entirely different key. So there was a key change in there. My main criticism is something that you yourself mentioned, though. This feels like a rush job, and it kind of was, as you admitted. And it came in right under the wire. So now what I'm looking forward to is when you work harder on a song. Lastly, I'm not sure what kind of camera you're using, but this one is not suited to fast motion, so often you're sort of a singing blur. So that's just a visual note for you. Your score is a little bit down from last week. It's a 5.1. Next up is also someone who came down a little bit from last week, Jasmine One Taylor, who sang Ain't No Way by Aretha Franklin. And I thought we were in for something great based on the first line. You were in kind of the sweet spot of your vocal, not pushing too hard, and it sounded really terrific. Kind of like Joss Stone, which is someone that you have been compared to quite a bit. But I do have some serious problems with the execution of this performance. I felt like nearly every multiple note run had some issue with the lack of note definition. Like they ran together. Like melted M&Ms on a hot summer day. And when those runs aren't perfectly clean, they detract rather than enhance the performance. As an example of someone who has very clean runs more often than not, I would look maybe to Adam's Music 11. Listen to how defined each note is in his more successful runs. But more conceptually speaking, I feel like there's an identity crisis in your music. Just because you really enjoy a song, and this is a lesson that can go for everybody, doesn't mean that it's suited to your voice. And I don't think this one is, simply because there's a little bit more firepower than you have. So either choose a different style of song or reconceptualize it to fit what you do have. And your score is 5.2. We're going to go now to part 2, which will be continued in the next video. So catch you on the flip side.